You're listening to the Crossroad Podcast with Joey and Kylie Willis. Through redefining effective leadership, the Crossroad Podcast explores what it means to live a life of intention and purpose. Join us as we explore the ins and outs of effective leadership and vibrant living.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Crossroad Podcast. My name is Joey Willis, and I'm the content developer at the Crossroad.
My name's Kylie Willis, and I am the project manager at the Crossroad.
So for those of you who aren't very familiar with us, the Crossroad is a collection of resources that we have gathered to help people navigate the challenges of life. We had this big idea, this big revelation a couple of years ago of thinking that life is so much about what happens at the crossroads. What happens when you're standing at this place of intersection and you're making a choice between one path and another path. And we often think about that in terms of these big moments. You know, we watch movies and it comes to the climax when the hero has to decide to fight or to give up, or where it's a romantic comedy and you have to, the hero decides to give his heart or her heart to the person that they love and hope that it's reciprocated. And so we recognize the power of these big crossroads, these huge dynamic moments where our life is completely different if we go one way or the other. But what we've discovered is that if I could look into my crystal ball and predict what's going on in your life today, you're probably facing a crossroad right now. It might be a crossroad at work. It might be a crossroad relationally. And the reason I can predict that is because I'm facing a crossroad now. I'm facing a crossroad every day. Every single day, throughout the day, there are many crossroads. Because every decision we make is an intersection where we have to decide what matters to us, which way we're going to go, and how we're going to lead our life. And all of us want most desperately to lead a life of meaning, a life of purpose, a life of influence. But we face this just gauntlet of crossroads and don't know for sure if we're going in the right direction or which way we should be going or which choices we should be making or how to know if the choice we made yesterday is an effective one or not. And it's all so confusing and overwhelming. So what we're going to try to do in the course of this podcast is talk through the issues surrounding those crossroads. How do you make decisions? How do you make decisions at work and at home that are in alignment with your values, with who you truly are and what you truly want? And so we're going to begin that by talking in this first season about leadership. Our tagline for Crossroads is redefining effective leadership, because we really think that leadership is one of the most effective tools for navigating the crossroads of life. So Kylie, do you want to talk a little bit about how our world views leadership in popular culture and how that is not really in alignment with the truth of what leadership is all about?
Absolutely. So the way that we most often see leadership taking place in our world is about a vying for power and a desire for control. Leadership tends to be all about me as opposed to all about how can we get to this place together. And so people tend to step over and walk over other people in an attempt to gain power in order to fulfill self. And so power is actually the end for most people as opposed to the means to getting to something that actually matters. And so we try to control other people in order to get what we want.
Yeah, we love competition as a people, as a culture, and there's not anything inherently wrong with competition, but we've turned the idea of leadership, the idea of influencing one another, into this game of leapfrog, of climb the ladder, of king of the hill, right? So it's an endeavor of who can just use the people around them to get to the top, to get more recognition, more validation, more money, more people following them, whatever the case is. It's more for me, instead of viewing leadership as an opportunity to to serve the people that are around you. And so what happens is we're like ships passing in the night with one another, because I'm just trying to use you to boost myself higher up the ladder. You're just trying to use me to boost yourself higher up the ladder. And we're not really loving and caring for one another. We're not really even hearing one another. And the other thing I think that is important about this discussion where we get leadership wrong in our culture is that we have a very narrow view of leadership. When we think of leadership, we think of CEOs of companies, we think of coaches on sports teams. We think positionally when we think of leadership. We think of authority figures. And I think one of the side effects of that in our culture is this sort of cult of personality. We look at our pastors or our sports figures or our politicians, and we, borderline worship them. We put so much on them because we view them as leaders, and they are the ones that can make a difference. They are the ones that can be effective in stewarding our culture. And really, although we don't say this quite explicitly, they are the ones that are responsible for my life. They are the ones who can do the things that would be necessary for me to live a better existence. And so one of the things we want to do is kind of broaden our scope, our concept of what leadership is and who is really a leader.
So Joey, something that I'm picking up here that is really interesting that we have just said, really interesting that we just said, we're so interesting. What I'm picking up here is that there are two different ways that we view leadership. One is that leadership is all about us, but the other way is that leadership is all on other people and is other people's responsibility. Can you dig into both of those ideas just a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we hold these two falsities at the same time, and they're in kind of a tension because they're incompatible, but we hold them nonetheless. And you're right. The first one is the things you were saying before, that leadership is about me. It's about power. It's about validation for myself. And on the other hand, leadership is about, as I was saying, others. It's about a dependence on people in positions. And I really think the connector, the thing that in our heads makes sense is we want the credit of leadership, but we want somewhere else to place the blame of leadership. So we want the perks of leadership for ourselves, but we want the responsibility of leadership to fall on somebody else. And so I think that creates this whole tension within each of us of we want to participate, we want to do things, but we don't want to take risks, and we don't want to be vulnerable, and we don't want to put ourselves out there and be criticized. So I think that's the reason we create in our minds and in our practical realities this two-pronged falsity where on the one hand we want to climb the ladder as much as we can and we'll bulldoze anybody that gets in our way. But on the other hand, we don't want to face criticism, and we are dependent on entities and personalities. And so we want to lean into those to kind of tell us what to do. And you're right, it's a complicated tension, but I think that's why we do leadership so poorly, is because we're, even in our own hearts and minds, sort of have this whirlpool, this black hole of both of those falsities happening at the same time.
I remember a couple years ago, we were on a work trip and we were talking with a coworker. And one of the things that we talked about was the idea that there are only certain people that can lead. There are people who are born to be leaders, and there are people who are born to be followers. And this coworker of ours was vehemently holding on to the idea that there are just some people who will never lead and will never have the capacity or the ability to lead other people. And Joe and I actually stand on the other side of that coin. We actually believe that everybody has the opportunity and the ability to lead. And we believe that because we believe that leadership is actually, it happens at the crossroad where character meets influence. And if you are stewarding your character to the best of your ability, your gifts, your talents, your skills, and you are in relationship with other people, you will automatically influence people either towards something or away from something. That is what leadership is. And so I think that we should probably define what character is and why it matters before we move on to the idea of influence being such a key component of leadership.
We're talking about leadership in the context of the crossroads of life, of these kinds of intersections. As Kylie mentioned, leadership is the intersection between personal character and influencing others. And so one of the ways that we say this is leadership begins with leading yourself. There are a ton of different... That sounds strange. First of all, let's say that. It sounds strange to think about leading yourself because we tend to think of leadership as, again, this kind of positional dynamic with me on one end and other people following behind me. And we'll talk about that. That's influence. But when we talk about character is about learning how to lead yourself. And that sounds strange, but it's not that different of a concept. Think about all of the things that make you who you are, all of the things that are swirling in your head. You've got all these thoughts. You've got these plans. You've got your feelings and emotions. You've got your experiences and pain, trauma that you're processing. You have ideas about what you want the future to look like. All of these are kind of swirling in you, just like shifting around like planets around the orbit of your heart or your soul or whatever you want to say. And so leading yourself is about trying to guide all of those things into a shared and intentional direction. We talked about how the Crossroad is all about how to live a life that is effective and meaningful. And that has to start internally. That has to start with you figuring out what does it look like to organize all of these different things, all of these principles and entities and ideas and emotions that are swirling within me. How do I take hold of those and organize those towards the direction that I really want them to go? And that is what character is. Character is leading yourself. It is learning how to truly be yourself. Because let's be honest, there are 1,000 different things out there that are going to tell you who you are and what you should be doing. You know, ad campaigns are desperately trying to tell you who you are and what you need, just this one little product to reach the full potential of who you are. We've got, political organizations, churches, schools, all kinds of institutions, your parents' expectations for you, even your spouse's expectations for you. And all of those can be valuable, but at the end of the day, you have to decide. You're at that crossroads. You're the person navigating this ship, and you have to decide. You have to discern who you want to be and how you want to behave. So that's what character is about. It's about learning how to lead yourself.
Another way to say it would be to say stewarding the choices and opportunities, the circumstances that present themselves in front of you in an intentional way, and interacting with life in a way that is purposeful. So how do we figure out what our character is and who we actually want to be?
So this is what we're going to get into throughout this season in the episodes that follow. And the short answer is intention. I think there's this idea that we just know who we are. Like when I was a teenager, I would yell at my parents like, you don't know me. Nobody understands me better than I do, which is probably not true. I don't understand myself. Sometimes I do things and I'm like, what did you just do? Like, why are you acting the way that you're acting? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? And so understanding ourselves, being able to organize and align all of those different entities takes work. It takes effort. It takes intention. It is not something that's just going to click into place magically one day. And a lot of us are just carrying our emotions and our ideas and all of those things I mentioned before, just in this giant, like Santa-sized bag, just dragging it along with no real intention and no real idea of what to do, and it's weighing us down. So how do you figure it out? You take the time to figure it out. We live in a world that's so obsessed with instant gratification. There's a part of you that's hoping that by the time this podcast is over, we can tell you how to be a person of character and what your character is and how to do that consistently and effectively without any speed bumps. But we can't, because life is hard. Being a human is difficult. There are no magic recipes that will get you through to the end. But throughout this season, we're going to talk about tools that you can use to help push all of those things within you into alignment. But what it really takes from the beginning is a commitment to do it, a decision that it matters and that you're going to be intentional about it and mindful of it, and less just like instinctual, less just like following whatever the loudest voice in your head is, whether that's internal or external, and start to ask yourself some questions about what really matters to me, who do I really want to be, and how do I put myself on that path and keep myself on that path. So in order to have an intersection, we need two roads. And so the first road is about character, how you lead yourself. The second road is about influence, how you lead others. So Kylie, what would you say about what is influence? How does that play into what we've been talking about in terms of effective leadership?
Well, influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something else. So it's the law of cause and effect, right? You do something and something happens because you have done something. And influence, therefore, is the ability for us to do something and affect other people in such a way that they either want to move towards us and follow us and do similar things to what we are doing, or they want to move away from us because the values that they have don't align with the things that we're moving towards. So why does influence matter so much, Joe?
Well, I think influence matters because we are made to be a communal people. So character, as important as it is not the only thing that matters in life. We're meant to bump into one another. We're meant to interact with one another. We're meant to do this thing in communities. We're meant to live life in groups. And so it matters because in order to live a life of purpose, we have to share. We have to serve others. We have to be a part of a group. Other than death, the biggest punishment we have as a society is solitary confinement, just sticking somebody in a room by themselves, because we're not made for that. It's not how we operate most. We are meant to interact with one another, to influence them and to have them influence us. We grow as individuals and as communities by sharing life together. There's this synergistic thing that happens where we become greater than the sum of our parts. And it's a real gift. It's a real opportunity. So influence is important because you're made to help other people. You're made to serve other people. It's part of your design and part of what's necessary to be a meaningful and purpose-filled person.
And I would add that not only are you made to help other people and serve other people, but they're also made to help you and serve you. It can't be a one-way street ever. It has to be a two-way street where I am taking all of the things that I am talented at and good at and all of my skills, and I am putting them towards something, and you're taking yours and you're putting them towards something. That's what synergy is, when we come together and we serve one another towards something that is bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, I remember when I was growing up, I was 15 years old, 14 maybe, and I went to a mission trip in Mexico with my church. And it was over spring break. So, all of these options in terms of going to the beach with friends or families had been set aside so I could go serve other people for a week. And it was miserable, practically speaking. It was dirty and it was windy and I was like scared sometimes, and it was hard work. And I'm not a very work with my hands type of guy. And it was just so hard and so difficult. But by the end of the trip, it was the greatest thing I had ever experienced. And I came back and spent all of my time figuring out how I could make sure to be back on that trip the next year. There was an article in my school paper, not my school paper, the city paper, because I was a soccer captain the next year and we won a bye in the playoffs. And when the newspaper was interviewing me, I said that I was most thankful because the bye would allow me to go to Mexico on this trip. And they took that and made it kind of the focus of the story. And so what was fascinating to me as a teenager, and what's a little bit baffling, is that it was more fun to be on this mission trip. It was more enjoyable to be dirty and working hard. And the reason was because I got to interact with these people in this completely different context. And I got to have them influence my life and show me a joy that I've never seen before in the midst of circumstances where I thought at the time that joy was just not an option. And I also had the ability to, as poor as I was at it, hammer together a house for these people and influence them in the life that they're living from that point forward. So we're meant for this. There's a sense of real joy and real meaning that we get by putting ourselves in places where we do things as a team and where we work together. All of our businesses, all of our relationships are all centered around this idea that we're better when we allow others to influence us, and we're better when we have the opportunity to influence others. But Kylie's right. It's a give and take. Influence is not about hitting somebody over the head and dragging them in the direction you want them to go. It's about discovering what is important and true and valuable and shared between two individuals, two entities, and how that can be used to awaken and to influence that longing for meaning, that longing for purpose in both individuals and both entities. So it's not a competition where you win and somebody else loses, and because they are the loser, they have to now follow you in the direction you want to go. It's about, in certain ways, discovering not a new direction, but discovering a way in which the values that you each hold have this shared component that you can do together, that you can do at the same time, that you can share, that can add value to where you're heading.
This actually makes me think about what our tagline is at the Crossroad, which is redefining effective leadership. And it makes me think about our team and how diverse and different everybody on our team is. Joey is big picture, he's a dreamer, he's a writer, he's got tons of ideas. And I don't connect with that at all. I actually don't have very much energy for ideas at all. But what I do have energy for is for creating something that is tangible, for making something actually happen. I'm very action-oriented. I'm very hands-on. And then we have Annabelle, who is so creative and also very detail-oriented and loves to make things that will communicate the message really well. And so she's in charge of marketing, and she does that so well. And then we have Jonathan, who is our podcast producer, and he is full of ideas, but he is also somebody who really likes to put things together in a way that makes sense and in a way that communicates the message to the world. And he actually helps to lead us and guide us along in the process that we're in too. And so when we bring all of these parts, all of these people together, we're actually able to synergistically use all of our gifts and talents and passions and values to influence you, the listener, you, the person who is trying to figure out how to steward your character and how to influence others in the world. It's not just about me influencing Joey and influencing Annabelle and influencing Jonathan. It's about all of us influencing one another and bringing our voices and ideas to the table and creating something that is bigger than ourselves and that will impact the world in such a way that we wouldn't be able to do by ourselves.
So I'm the big picture guy, as Kylie said, and to zoom out to what we are trying to say here, you want to live a life of purpose, just like I do. You want your existence to have meaning. The more meaning, the better. What we're saying here is that in order to do that, you find yourself standing at this crossroad between character and influence, between leading yourself and leading others. And you are there, the driver of the vehicle, standing at that intersection, trying to discern how best to live, how best to choose, how best to steward the opportunity of who you are and where you are. So this season is going to be about how do you do that? First starting with leading yourself, then moving into influencing other people. How do you lead well? How do you steward well? How do you take all of the opportunities and all of the elements that make up life and be intentional about guiding them, utilizing them towards the person you want to be, towards the life of meaning that you're truly after? So the intersection between character and influence is you. It's each person. It's the identity of who you are. And so you're that intersection. You are the thing that's determining how character and influencing others can be utilized in such a way to bring the fullest purpose and meaning into your life.
And into the lives of others. So, in the next episode, we're going to have a special guest, a really good friend of ours, Dave Cunard, who works in leadership and works in helping people to develop their character and understand how they can influence others really well. And he's going to join us, and he's going to talk a little bit more about what influence is and how we can use it within our lives and within the lives of other people towards something.
Yeah, and just a warning as we continue through this series, we call all of the things that we're going to talk about throughout this season tools. And the reason we call them tools is because, like we mentioned for character, it's up to you to take them, to use them, to be intentional about what you're making and how you're making it. So we're going to give you some things that will help you, starting with a lot of great things that Dave has to say, but we're going to give you some things that will help you in this journey so that you can steward your character, you can steward your influence, you can live that life of purpose, that life of meaning that you're really longing for, and you can invite others to do the same.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Crossroad Podcast. The world is out there, waiting for you to become the best leader you can possibly be. We hope our conversations have helped. For more, please visit our website, thecrossroad.net.